Let's explore the makeup of modern gangs. Despite two common factors that define a gang, gangs themselves vary in activity, makeup, location, leadership style, and age. Gangs are not exclusive to large urban cities. They also exist in suburban and rural areas too, including Native American reservations. Most estimates of the extent of gangs is obtained by surveying police and sometimes other officials in samples of cities around the U.S. The most comprehensive survey examining the extent of gangs is carried out by the National Gang Center, which is formerly known as the National Youth Gang Center. It's an agency created by the U.S. Department of Justice. The data from the survey suggests that gangs are widespread, present in all major U.S. cities, with populations over 250,000, and in many smaller areas of the U.S. Disorganized or deprived inner city communities are most likely to develop gangs, also communities with the highest level of delinquency rates. We can explain this using the learned theories and associations from our previous chapters. Deprived communities are lower in control, so they lack collective efficacy. There's more strain. Juveniles have trouble reaching goals through legitimate channels. Migration. How do gangs get to these areas? And according to the National Gang Center, they found that many jurisdictions over the last several years have experienced gang migration. And in a few areas, more than half of all gang members had come from other areas. And there's three views or perspectives on gang migration. Established gangs from major cities migrate to other areas in order to set up local chapters for drug distribution. They recruit the local youth to deal drugs for the gang in exchange for membership. Another perspective is that most migration of gangs happens by accident under a couple circumstances. A gang member's family relocates and the member develops a chapter of his previous gang in the new city. The other is a group of youths from a city with minimal or no gang experience and decides to establish one and borrows the symbols of an existing gang. They call that a copycat. Prison street gang. There's a connection with prison gangs and the street gangs. There's a connection and association whereby incarcerated gang members rely on the street gang members to help them with getting income or pass messages and their needs for inside the prison. So they make connections with the street gang members. Sometimes street members move to where the member is incarcerated and sets up shop there just so they can be closer. The family of the inmate relocates if it's a distant facility so they can be closer to the inmate, and then when the inmate is released to the community, they just stay. So those are some of the reasons or perspectives on how gang migration works. How are gangs organized and structured? Gangs are often portrayed as highly organized groups with well-defined roles like president, vice president, treasurer, and well-defined goals and rules that are supposed to be followed, with members expressing great loyalty to one another and to the group. And there are some that are like that, especially the older gangs in large cities. Most, however, are not like that. They are more loosely organized. There's no well-defined roles. There's a distinction between core members and fringe members, or those wannabes, which constitute young juveniles who want to join a gang or be more involved. The core members function as leaders, but leaders may shift from occasion to occasion. Gangs want recognition from rival gangs as well as from the community at large. In order to gain recognition in the community, gangs must be able to effectively communicate. Gangs primarily communicate through graffiti, tattoos, hand signs, and clothing. Graffiti can be found in every large city in the U.S., and many similar communities. Graffiti is used to let another know that a particular territory is under the control of a particular gang. Tattoos, hand signs, and clothing, those are used to signal a particular gang affiliation. There are various types of gangs involving primarily boys. Gangs are typically divided into categories based on what their activities are. The gang activities are, there's a social gang. These members are involved in some minor drug and alcohol use, and it focuses on social activities. There's the party gang, focuses on drug use and sales, but not other delinquent activities. Their goal is to fund drug use by selling drugs. There's serious delinquent gangs, and these focus on serious delinquent activities like theft, but not drug dealing, and they seldom use drugs. Organized gangs, heavy involvement in serious delinquent behavior and violence across the board. Criminality could be drug use and sales, could be robbery, could be theft, could be sexual assault. It's on its way to being a formal criminal enterprise. The members, the roles differ depending on the gang. As I said before, gangs are loosely formed and defined, and they're referred to as near groups, meaning that these groups have limited cohesion, impermanence, minimal consensus of what are the norms. There's shifting membership. The leader is waves. It's more distributed leadership amongst these groups, and limited definitions as to membership expectations. So who makes up these groups? Gang members typically have been seen as being juveniles. Youths become interested in gang activity during their preteen years. Research has shown that juveniles first learn about gangs at about 9 years old. They get involved in violence between 10 and 11 years old, and they join a gang soon after, usually by 12. Therefore, gang participation usually begins in adolescence. But what happens to juvenile gang members once they become adults? Traditionally, once the juvenile gang member reached adulthood, he or she would stop participating in a gang and take on adult responsibilities such as employment and family. However, evidence has emerged that more and more gang members are continuing their participation in gangs into adulthood. What was once considered a juvenile phenomena has become an adult problem as well. In fact, several police departments now report that the majority of gang members in their jurisdiction are adults over the age of 18. Why? 2 reasons have been cited. I think I referenced them a little while ago. 2 reasons have been cited for this change in age of gang members. One, the dramatic changes in the economic structure of the U.S. have had a significant impact. In particular, the decline in manufacturing jobs in the U.S. has been cited as the primary reason for the increasing age of gang members. Manufacturing jobs typically require few skills but pay relatively well. These jobs were common in the 50s through the 70s but declined by the end of the century. There has been a dramatic increase in service jobs in the U.S. The service jobs most gang members are unable to obtain. They're able to attain them. There's few requirements, skills needed for those, but the pay is not high enough to really attract a juvenile gang member away from their gang. The increased emphasis on drug dealing has led to a stable supply of money into gangs. Gangs are more profit-oriented today than in the past. The stable supply of money and the lack of employment alternatives outside of a gang have led to few options for gang members who want to leave the gang once they become adults. But instead, many gang members just continue their participation into their 20s, 30s, and even into their 40s. Gender. Traditionally, gangs were male-oriented. However, that is now becoming quite different. Gender mixed are the gangs, and it is said that gangs are now made up of 1/3 female. It is estimated that 7% of all gang members in this country are female. However, data from the Rochester Youth Development Study has shown that females are even more likely to participate in gangs than males. Of those who they represented in their survey, 22% of females versus 18% of males reported gang participation. There's also been a trend in recent years towards the formation of all-female gangs with their own leadership, rules, and membership. Why do girls join gangs? We discussed this in the gender and delinquency chapter, generally for the same reasons boys do. They often have friends or relatives in the gang, and the gang is also seen as a solution to the problems they face, many of the same problems shared with males like class and race discrimination, as well as financial opportunity and protection. But there are two reasons with special relevance to female gang participation. Female gang members are more likely than male gang members to have experienced problems like abuse at home. Females join the gang in an effort to cope with such problems. The gang makes it easier to escape from home life and may function as a surrogate family. According to criminologist Jody Miller's research, females are more likely to join gangs in an effort to form close family-like ties with their peers, while males are more likely to join because they're attracted to the action that's associated with gangs. Also, females are more likely to join gangs in an effort to partially escape from the gender oppression they encounter or anticipate encountering in the future. The gender oppression that many lower income females will likely encounter include a future of meaningless domestic labor with little possibility of educational or occupational escape, subordination to the man of the house, responsibility of children, and the social isolation of a housewife. The gang represents for its members this ideally collective solution to the bleak future that awaits. It is a source of fun and excitement. However, female gang members often find that they are confronted with a range of problems when they join a gang, including physical and sexual abuse by the male gang members, who many still hold sexist attitudes. So, nonetheless, females are growing in gangs and starting their own gangs as well. We'll turn to ethnicity and racial composition. So, no racial or ethnic group is excluded from gang participation. Gang members include Caucasian, African American, Hispanic, and Asian members. According to the National Youth Gang Survey, it is estimated that 35% of gang members are African American, 46% are Hispanic, 7% are Asian, and 12% are Caucasian. Typically, gangs are racially or ethnically homogenous. In other words, Hispanic gangs have only Hispanic members, while most Asian gangs have only Asian members. However, this varies from community to community. In cities like LA and Chicago, gangs are usually racially or ethnically segregated, while gangs in Miami have a tendency to be racially mixed. With that said, most gang offenses are intra-ethnic. The conflict between gangs usually involves gangs of the same racial or ethnic background. The book does an excellent job at exploring the specific gangs and their history. I do have slides. My slides provide a summary, but I'm not going to explore each one in grave detail. I'll let the book do that, but there's a discussion on the African American gangs, Latino gangs, Asian gangs, Anglo gangs, and of course a hybrid of gangs. What I want to switch to is criminality and violence. Does gang membership cause delinquency? Members of youth gangs commit more crime than any other group of youths. While this association between gang membership and delinquency is unquestioned, there are three different explanations for the relationship. There's a selection hypothesis, where delinquent individuals are more likely to join gangs than non-delinquent individuals and just continue or maintain committing their delinquent acts. There's the facilitation hypothesis. The gang membership itself leads to deviant behavior because it provides the structure and support for those kind of activities. And then there's the enhancement hypothesis, which takes those first two, the selection and the facilitation hypothesis, and they work together, increasing the enhanced criminality. One who already engages in delinquent acts now has a more structured and supported platform for continued engagement of such activities. So it's enhanced. Gang members engage in a wide variety of criminal acts, both serious and minor. While gang members are disproportionately involved in all forms of crime, their disproportionate involvement is greatest for serious and violent offenses, including homicide. There are a number of reasons for this proportionate involvement in serious crimes like homicide, including the fact that the gang members are more likely than other juveniles to own and carry guns, including automatic high-power guns. The presence of guns often turns what would otherwise be an assault into a homicide. However, there are certain myths regarding gang crime that should be addressed. First, some have the impression that gang members spend most of their time engaging in crime. Although gang members do commit a lot of crime, they spend a vast majority of their time simply hanging out, basically talking and waiting for something to happen. Second, their second favorite thing to do is party. So partying is what they do second most. And when they do engage in crime, they commit more minor crimes than serious ones, something that is true of just delinquents in general. They commit minor crimes more so than the serious crimes. Street youth gangs do not control, this is the second myth, youth gangs do not control the drug sales in the U.S. They engage in drug sales, but they don't control the sales. When they do sell, it is as individuals and it's done sporadically. The quote-unquote drug gangs that control the drug sales in the U.S. are made up of older members that are organized, not youth street gangs. However, though, the older drug gangs may employ some of the members of the street gangs with relative to making some sales. And the third myth is many believe that the victims of gang violence are frequently innocent bystanders. It is true, though, that innocent bystanders are sometimes killed and wounded, but the member of other gangs are far and away the most frequent targets of gang violence. So most acts of gang violence involve acts of revenge, turf disputes, and other honor, courage, prestige standing in the gang as reasons for gang violence. Types of crimes that gangs engage in: minimal drug sales, drug selling, but not controlling it; theft, burglaries, assault. They're involved in fraud crimes such as identity theft and money laundering. Common crime is counterfeiting, and not counterfeiting money, but goods. Different types of goods, music, cigarettes, and those types of things. So now we must answer, why do youths join gangs to begin with? And that's going to be our next topic.